Sylvester Stallone built his entire public identity on characters who refused to accept defeat. Rocky Balboa absorbed punishment from men twice his size and kept standing. John Rambo walked through war zones that should have buried him and came out breathing. The audiences who fell for those characters saw grit and resilience and the refusal to bend, and they loved every frame of it. None of that was entirely fictional. The man behind both characters spent decades waging private wars against some of the most powerful names in the film industry, wars driven by wounded pride, bitter competition, personal betrayal, and in at least one case, a sandwich. 6 people crossed Sylvester Stallone in ways he decided he could never forgive, and the stories of what followed reveal a side of Hollywood's most durable action star that his movies never bothered to show you. Arnold Schwarzenegger became Stallone's most famous rival, and the feud between them didn't develop gradually. It detonated on a single night. The occasion was the 1977 Golden Globe Awards, a ceremony Stallone attended expecting Rocky to be celebrated as the underdog triumph it genuinely was. Instead, he sat through category after category watching his film lose, and there across the room stood Schwarzenegger, an Austrian newcomer with a thick accent and a physique built for magazine covers rather than serious acting, laughing out loud every time Rocky fell short before walking away with the award for New Star of the Year. Stallone later admitted what he did next without any particular embarrassment. He threw a bowl of flowers at Schwarzenegger's head. That single act of rage became the starting pistol for one of the most relentless rivalries the entertainment industry had ever produced. The 1980s turned into a full Cold War between two men absolutely determined to outperform each other on every available front. Stallone built his empire through Rocky II, Rocky III, Rocky IV, and First Blood, while Schwarzenegger answered with Conan the Barbarian, The Terminator, and Predator, each film arriving like a counterpunch timed to land exactly when the other man seemed most comfortable. The mockery running between them was never disguised or subtle. In Twins, Schwarzenegger delivered a knowing smirk directly at a Rambo poster on screen, a joke requiring no explanation for any audience watching. In Tango and Cash, Stallone arranged for an Arnold lookalike to be beaten down twice in a single scene, and nobody in the theater missed the point. But the move that stung most came when Schwarzenegger deliberately pretended to want the script for Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, calculating that Stallone's ego would make him grab the project before anyone else could touch it. Stallone took the bait completely, signed on, and watched critics tear the film apart as a desperate attempt to replicate the comedy success Schwarzenegger had built for himself. The trap had been set and sprung with perfect precision, and Stallone had walked straight into it. That bitterness eventually ran out of fuel, and that's where the story takes a turn nobody watching in 1985 would have predicted. By the 2000s, both men were appearing together in The Expendables, and they even opened a restaurant side by side. Stallone eventually said publicly that the rivalry, as brutal and exhausting as it had been, pushed both of them to work at a level they might never have reached independently. A feud born from a flower bowl thrown across a Golden Globes banquet hall ended, against all reasonable expectation, in something that resembled genuine mutual respect. The confrontation with Kirk Douglas on the set of First Blood in 1982 was shorter and more contained than the Schwarzenegger War, but it came far closer to killing something irreplaceable before it could survive long enough to matter. Douglas, already a Hollywood legend celebrated for Spartacus and Paths of Glory, had agreed to play Colonel Troutman, the military figure who understood John Rambo better than anyone else alive. The combination of Douglas's old Hollywood authority and Stallone's raw physicality looked like a natural pairing on paper. On set, it became a power struggle that neither man had any intention of losing quietly. Douglas had studied David Morrell's source novel carefully, and his conclusion was that the film needed to end with Troutman killing Rambo. He pushed for that ending repeatedly, framing every objection around his own persona. Kirk Douglas wouldn't deliver this line. Kirk Douglas requires a stronger conclusion. For Stallone, who had fought to ensure Rambo stood as a symbol of what wounded veterans carried home from war rather than a symbol of senseless death, those demands felt like a direct attack on the story's core meaning. Director Ted Kotcheff eventually ended the argument by telling Douglas plainly that this was the film they were making, and he was welcome to leave if he disagreed with that. Douglas left within days. Richard Crenna was contacted at the last minute, memorizing his lines during the drive to the set, and his calm, measured performance ended up providing exactly the emotional anchor the film needed, balancing Stallone's fury in ways Douglas likely never would have managed. Rambo survived, the franchise launched, and $1 billion eventually justified every decision made in Douglas's absence. Stallone never forgave what he saw as arrogance dressed up as artistic vision, and Douglas became the figure history remembers for nearly destroying one of cinema's most durable action franchises before it ever got started. Eddie Murphy's falling out with Stallone cuts differently than the others because nothing about it started with rivalry or professional competition. Through the late 1980s, the two men shared a genuine friendship, two of the industry's biggest box office names moving through the same social world with real mutual respect between them. What ended it was a rumor, and rumors in Hollywood carry weight that facts sometimes can't match. During the production of Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 1987, Stallone's wife at the time, Brigitte Nielsen, appeared in the film opposite Murphy. Nielsen was magnetic on screen and impossible to overlook, and crew members began whispering that her connection with Murphy had moved past the professional. Tabloids picked up every whisper and amplified it until Stallone's name appeared everywhere attached to scandal and public humiliation. Whether anything had actually occurred was almost secondary to the fact that the humiliation had already become visible to the entire industry. Stallone picked up the phone and demanded answers from Murphy directly. Murphy denied everything. None of that denial was enough to repair what had already cracked. By the 1990s, the friendship had dissolved entirely. Mutual friends had quietly chosen sides, and Hollywood's press was running their box office results against each other as though the personal rupture required a statistical scoreboard. Murphy later described it as genuinely sad that gossip had dismantled something real between them. Stallone's public silence on the subject said everything his words left out, and the man who had once been his closest ally in the industry became, with one rumor and one phone call, just another name on a list he maintained very carefully. Richard Gere carries the distinction of having sparked Stallone's longest-running grudge with the least dramatic inciting incident in the entire list. The year was 1974, and both men were genuinely unknown, two actors scrapping for screen time in a low-budget production called The Lords of Flatbush. Stallone had co-written the script and carried real personal investment in the character of Stanley Rosiello. Gere brought a theater-trained precision to his work that clashed immediately with Stallone's instinctive, unpolished energy, and the tension between those two approaches built steadily until a cramped car scene when Gere's sandwich dripped mustard onto Stallone's pants. Stallone elbowed Gere in the head and physically threw him out of the vehicle in front of everyone present. The set went completely silent. Producers removed Gere from the production and cited creative differences as the official explanation, which everyone on that set understood as a polite fiction covering the actual truth. The fallout didn't stop at the set. Stallone mocked the incident in interviews for years afterward, calling it a personality clash that simply had no solution, while Gere carried the memory of that public humiliation through his later rise in American Gigolo and An Officer and a Gentleman. Decades later, the two men still avoided each other without apology or explanation, and what could have been an early professional alliance between two future icons of American cinema remained a permanent silence traceable back to a single drop of mustard that Stallone chose never to release. Bruce Willis and Stallone had something that felt like real camaraderie when the Expendables brought them together in the early 2010s. Stallone built that franchise deliberately as a reunion of the action generation he belonged to, a gathering constructed on the stated principle that loyalty mattered more than individual ego, and Willis playing the CIA operative church gave the ensemble additional credibility through his presence alone. The first two films delivered on that promise. The sense of brotherhood felt genuine, and audiences responded to it. And then came Expendables 3 in 2013, and Willis communicated his terms to the production: $4 million for 4 days of work, $1 million per day, with no negotiation and no compromise available. For Stallone, whose entire stated philosophy behind the franchise was that legacy and loyalty outweighed individual demands, the number landed as a direct personal betrayal dressed up as a business request. He cut Willis from the film immediately and brought in Harrison Ford as a replacement. Then he went to Twitter and called Willis greedy and lazy in plain language that required no interpretation from anyone reading it. Those two words attached themselves to Willis's public reputation overnight and have never fully come loose. Expendables 3 still earned more than $200 million at the global box office, but the atmosphere inside the franchise never recovered its original warmth. Fans who had grown up watching these men in separate films and then experienced the genuine thrill of seeing them share a screen together noticed the absence immediately and loudly. The sense of real brotherhood that had powered the first two films developed fractures it couldn't seal. Stallone had communicated exactly where his line was and made absolutely certain the industry was watching when he drew it in public. The friendship gave way to a silence that has held firm ever since, and the two men have kept their distance with the kind of consistency that suggests neither of them is waiting for the other to reach out first. 6 battles, 6 different outcomes, and a portrait of Stallone that his most famous roles in action films never captured on screen. Some of these feuds burned themselves out and left something resembling respect behind. Others simply went cold and stayed that way permanently. What connects all of them is a man who decided early in his career that his sense of dignity was worth whatever it cost to defend, and who spent the next several decades demonstrating he meant exactly that. The rivalry with Schwarzenegger shaped an entire decade of cinema. The clash with Douglas saved a franchise. The break with Murphy ended a friendship that had been real. The incident with Gere began a grudge that still hasn't lifted. The Willis fallout became the most public of all of them, and the most damaging to the reputation of the man who left. The question of which story hits hardest is one only the person watching gets to decide, and the comments below are already full of answers worth reading.